Are your innovation efforts consistently delivering results that you want, or do they feel more like a series of random experiments? We're diving into systematic innovation management with one of the foremost experts in the field. And this isn't just about being more creative, it's about transforming how your organization turns ideas into market success reliably and repeatably. Every product leader faces these challenges of delivering value that drives business growth while managing risk. Without a systematic approach, you're essentially gambling with your innovation resources. In this episode, you'll discover exactly how to implement a systematic innovation management approach based on the recently published ISO 56001 framework. Our guest is Dr. Magnus Karlsson, adjunct professor in innovation management at the KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. Magnus has over a decade of experience as director of new business development and innovation at Ericsson, where he developed approaches for collaborative innovation. And he has since built on that experience for nearly the last 20 years, being instrumental in developing international innovation management standards with the Swedish Institute for Standards, a key contributor to the ISO standards. Magnus is also a partner at Amplify, a Sweden company, which helps organizations across the world to innovate. And while your competitors might still be relying on inspiration and luck, you could be implementing a proven system that delivers consistent innovation results. Let's find out how. Also, if you're listening to us and you would rather watch the discussion, simply go to our YouTube channel, search for Product Mastery Now on YouTube. Let's jump in right after this.
How can you unlock your full potential as a product manager? We're sharing the product management insights you need. They are based on the 7 research-backed knowledge areas for product mastery. You'll learn to create products customers love, enhance your influence, and elevate your career. Welcome to Product Mastery Now, hosted by Dr. Chad McAllister, product management professor, practitioner, and your guide.
Magnus, thank you so much for joining us. I am really excited to hear more about your work and the standard that you've helped put together.
Thank you very much, Chad. It's great to be here and talk about this important standard.
It is, and I want to know more about this, particularly as I help graduate students learn about such things. And this one don't have good knowledge of yet. Can you kind of just set the stage, briefly explain what this 56001 standard is and why it was developed?
Yes, and since you're coming from the university space and academics are quite well aware of the ins and outs of innovation and innovation management. As a matter of fact, we know quite well what works and what doesn't work in an innovation setting and what is required from an organization to actually deliver tangible value at the end. However, unfortunately, we are not seeing that knowledge being turned into practice in most organizations. So they are still struggling, there are resistance to do innovation work and so on and so forth. So what we have done in this project, the standardization of innovation management, is that we have tried to codify all that knowledge from research and practice and put that into the framework of a management system so that it becomes more accessible to any company or any organization for that matter.
Okay, excellent. So trying to help take what we know from research and practice as well and get it into the hands of organizations and help everyone do a better job innovating. And I think you're spot on, right? One of the courses that I do teach to executive MBA students is how do you create a innovation capability in the organization? And we do have tools for this. We have some proven information about how this works, and it just isn't widely adopted. What was your role in creating this standard? And obviously, you have several years of experience in doing innovation and now helping other organizations with this. Why did you see this standard as being particularly important to develop?
When you're doing innovation in an organization, you get a feeling for what are the conditions that work and will help you, but you also get a very strong feeling for what are the barriers. What is it that are hindering you to innovate more effectively? And that could be many things. It could be leadership, it could be the culture that's inside the organization, it could be the way strategy is being laid out. And obviously, there are things related to process, the tools you're using, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And all of these things are needed in order to make innovation happen in an effective and efficient way. But typically, we are optimizing this on one or a few of those parameters. We need to look very holistically. So we need to take that systems approach to creating or building that capability that you're talking to. So That's really why we got into this. We saw that it's not enough to perfect your processes, it's not enough to bring in a new tool, it's not even enough to have a great strategy because there are other factors that will
Right.
influence the outcome. So we really need to start looking at this in a holistic way. So that was one of the triggers. And coming from the practice side, this was very clear. And there is another trigger I think is also interesting, working with Ericsson, because when the board of directors were doing their annual risk analysis, one thing came up at the top of that list, and that was losing our innovation capability. And that
Mm.
is important, losing our innovation capability. And that goes for a lot of organizations that are innovative today, and maybe they take that for granted. What if we should lose our innovative capability? That would be the highest risk that we could actually face. So then the question came up, how do we know if we are about to lose our innovative capability? Not a problem for Ericsson at the time, but for many other organizations, they're actually doing that. And then we asked, is there a way we can measure this? Not by asking a specific professor and consultant, but is there a more, let's say, a neutral or credible way to be able to understand if this is happening or not? And that's
Hmm.
why I got engaged in, let's see if the concept of a management system could help us to do that. And as a matter of fact, and you just said it, a few months ago, we published ISO 56001, which is a international standard on innovation management systems. So now, eventually, we got this approach so we could understand better what is the capability right now. Are we happy with that capability? If we're not, how do we strengthen it? So we got very specific and concrete actions out from an analysis like that.
Okay, I think you described the problem well, and a lot of listeners would relate to this. It tends to be more rare the organization that can do operations and innovation equally well. And it seems like as organizations grow over time, and I've experienced this throughout my career too, as we scale and we get better job of developing what we're doing, right? We optimize our operations and we tend to kind of create barriers, not purposely, but barriers that push out anything that disrupts the optimizing of operations. Well, if we're doing innovation, we're inherently doing something new. So there's some friction there, and you have to do both, right? And there's organizations like Amazon gets lifted up as we insist on innovation, so it's part of the culture. But that doesn't just happen. You really have to work on it. And it sounds like this is a standard that helps organizations at the bigger picture certainly understand the steps, which I'm hoping we'll get into in a moment, but recognizing you do have challenges in place that you need to overcome if you want to take innovation seriously and have it be part of your organizational mission and your culture and like. There was a previous standard, and I don't know the history on this, so you can clear this up for us, 56002, which I think talked at a higher level about innovation. What was that about, and how does it differ from the one that is actually the lower number now, but more recently published?
Exactly. No, that's a very good question. And as a matter of fact, they're very similar. 56002 was published first, and it's what we call the guidance standard. It gives recommendations. So content-wise, we then upgraded that to the highest level of a management system, which is ISO 56001, which is what we call a requirement standard. So it has got crisp requirements, and it also can be used for certification purposes. So should you decide to adopt it, and then you can ask an independent certification body to
Hmm.
actually audit it. And if successful, you can get certified for that standard that actually shows that you do have those capabilities in place in the organization. Pretty much similar to other management system standard like quality,
Right.
9001, environment, 14001, and so on. So it actually sits in that series, and they are plug and play. So you just add innovation to your quality management system, should you decide to do so, and you would be up and running. So
Okay.
so that is the main difference. Content-wise, they are very similar.
Okay. This is very new, right? We're just talking a few months now for the O1 standard. So a lot of organizations did pursue the 9001 standard for quality as a way to demonstrate to others and to their customers that we're taking quality seriously, and it certainly is improving their operations. There's also a little bit of aspect of marketing there, right? That it's adding some credibility
Yeah.
to what they're doing. Do you know of organizations that are starting to do that with 56001 that say we made this commitment to quality. We see innovation being important to our future, and it's how we create value for customers in the future. Do you see organizations also pursuing this for that certification benefit?
We're seeing right now that quite a few organizations are starting to adopt the thinking, and that is
Hmm.
more like the management system approach to innovation. So that we're seeing. The standard being so new, we don't really have a lot of cases and traction around who is
Sure.
getting certified, but certainly we do see a lot of interest. And I think that you're mentioning some of the key triggers for that. One is there's a curiosity to see we're very innovative, but do we measure up? Have we been thinking of all these different aspects? So that's a curiosity. So organizations would then say, let's do an assessment to find out, to see
Hmm.
where we have any gaps and so on. And then obviously we can then decide to close some of the gap if we think that it's worth doing so. Others are thinking more like certification is something that we really need for the reasons that also you mentioned. It's for branding. It could be a promise to customers. It could be a way to attract employees or partners if you're working in an ecosystem and so on. That could be a way to demonstrate we not only say
Right.
we're innovative, we also got objective or kind of outside independent proof that we actually have been thinking through this in a systematic way.
Yeah. Okay. I've been part of an organization, this international organization based here in the States, Product Development and Management Association, PDMA. And they've been around since 1976, created for similar reasons of how you introduced the standard, which was we had academic researchers recognizing there were some innovation best practices going on and wanted to
Mhm.
get that into practitioners' hands more easily. And they still research the space, and they've been doing this for 50 plus years now. They offer each year a corporate outstanding corporate innovator award, the OCI, and companies compete for this. And so no kidding, PDMA sends out on-site people to review and see what's going on. And kind of like the Baldrige Award on the quality side,
Mhm.
where companies use that process to really improve themselves. And most organizations take several years of applying and going through the process because they're using it more for transformation. Like, how can we actually be serious about this? Not just the
Mhm.
recognition from the award. And this outstanding corporate innovator award is kind of similar. And I fully expect that the organizations, once they hear about 56001, would do a similar thing. Like, this is, or if we want to make a commitment to innovation, this is a system that helps us do that. And as we work on it, at some point we can get certified and get that recognition that we actually have taken it seriously and accomplished it. So I think there's
Yeah,
some hope there.
exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see what happens along those lines. But I think the similarities are very much there. And we look at, a discipline matures over time. And let's say product development discipline, the project management discipline, the quality management discipline, and so on. They have matured in a certain way. And these things are being established and so on. And the practices are now being adopted by most organizations. And
Yeah.
innovation management, we're still on that curve from, let's say, a more ad hoc and we get innovations if we're lucky kind of attitude. And let's build the foundation and let's do it systematically. So we're building the discipline and at the same time the profession of innovation management with these standards.
Yeah, absolutely. We see these surveys, right? And you're familiar with them about asking CEOs of companies, how important is innovation to you? It's one of our top three priorities, right?
Yeah.
And that number, the different surveys, but it's like 94% of senior leaders say, yes, innovation is important to us. And then the same organizations, when they're examined, how many of them actually have some sort of standard innovation capability, something that they can communicate? It's like
Hmm.
14%, right? There's
Hmm.
this big gap. And I have the pleasure of working with companies at times and helping them learn, do better, innovating. And often the projects that they hold up as like, hey, yeah, this is an example of how we innovate. It was a VP that did something in the dark, right? Kept this project
Hmm.
under
Hmm.
wraps until it got too big to kill because, as you said before, there's organizational barriers in the way, right? So there's
Hmm.
not a systematic system there. And that's what we're going to get into. And I would really love for you to take us through the core elements of this standard, the 56001. How does it convey to an organization, here's your systematic things you should have in place to say how to innovate?
Yeah, there are a number of them. And as I said, It's a list of requirements and they are formulated in a way that you should have this capability and so on. But if we just summarize on a headline level, there are a few initial requirements around understanding the context, and that's both what's going on around you and inside your organization. Because innovation is based on knowledge. So it's a knowledge about new technologies, new opportunities, where are customers going, what's happening in neighboring industries, and so on and so forth. And that will be the fuel then to set what we call the innovation intent. And that's really what you think through upfront. Why do we need to innovate? And at that point, maybe you say, well, we can grow, we can prosper without doing anything new. That's very seldom the case for any organization. To
Right.
survive and prosper, they need to do at least certain things new or renew themselves. And that's where you start to kind of zone into that statement. What is our innovation intent? What is it that we must achieve when we now are doing something new and innovative? Then you move in and look more around leadership. And that is how committed are our leaders? And we need to have top management on board. We all know that we can innovate in an organization without top management knowing it or caring. And you just mentioned a case when things are happening inside the organization and so on.
Right.
And that's fantastic. It takes you actually using the energy, the engagement of the organization and so on. But to eventually create something new that will move the organization forward, top management needs to be involved in one way or another. If not before, in the later stages to provide the resources and so on. And that's a very big barrier. So if you can upfront be engaging with top management so that they actually take ownership of the innovation management system, they are using that to create the future for their organization. So that's around leadership, and that involves things like an innovation strategy and promoting an innovation culture. Also, things like roles and responsibilities, we know that if they are unclear, we will waste resources and we will just run
Mhm.
around and we will
Yeah.
not accomplish a lot of things. Then we move into more details around portfolio management, collaboration management, setting up the right organizations. We know that if we're trying to innovate in the middle of the core operational part of the organization, small initiatives get easily killed. Do we need to protect them by putting them in a separate organization and so on and so forth? So we need to think that through. Then there's a lot of things around support. Could be things like people, money, infrastructure, tools, and so on and so forth that you need for your innovation activities to run smoothly. And those needs to be allocated. And that's much easier if you have an innovation strategy and if top management is being involved in your initiative. And then you're moving to the kind of the essential part where we look at innovation processes.
Mm.
And there are certain steps or certain phases in your innovation workflow, if you will, that we know are really good to have there, and they are stated in the standard. Doesn't mean that you need to follow exactly that flow, but it's like a reminder that these, and there are actually 5 building blocks, you will increase your chances if you make sure that you have these in your own innovation processes.
Can you take us
And
through the building blocks while we're talking about it?
yeah, let's do that before I move to the last part. The first one is about identifying opportunities. That's, for example, knowing
Hmm.
about the customer problem. So that will be the first one. The second one is to generate ideas and creating concepts that could address that challenge or that problem. The third one is around validating concepts, and that's around experimentation, trial and error, and so on, and doing that in a very systematic way. Sometimes we call that hypothesis driven learning. Testing, making hopefully small, inexpensive tests. We could try out, does this solution work with a customer problem? And there are different ways of doing that. And the more time we spend early in the process trying to figure out before we starting to build or develop something
Right.
expensive, the better it is because that's where we calibrate the value that we could capture in the end. So we do that in the kind of in the early part of the processes. The two last steps is around development and deployment, and those are typically more, I mean, more well known. Those processes are in place and so on. But the message is really here: do not jump into development and spending a lot of money too quickly before you have understood what is really the challenge here, what is the opportunity that is worth capturing, and do we really have a good idea to address that problem?
Right.
And
Absolutely.
very often things go wrong right there because we're moving forward because we are falling in love with our solutions and our ideas. And then at the end, we see that it didn't quite do what we thought it should do for our customers.
Right.
So
As
those are
I've
the
heard you,
five. different
Okay.
parts in the process description.
As I frequently tell my students, fall in love with the customer's problem, not your solution. And my
Exactly,
background is
exactly.
engineering, right? And we say
Hmm.
things like, this is my baby. This
Hmm.
thing did
Yeah.
not exist until I brought it into the world. And we get attached to our solutions. And we
Yes,
really need to
yes.
understand, are we adding value to the
Hmm.
customer, or are we just enamored with the thing that we made that people don't actually care about? Okay, so
Exactly.
that was
Yeah. I
innovation.
have a similar background. I completely recognize
Okay,
what you're
yeah.
saying.
Yep.
Yes.
That was innovation processes. I think you said there was one more of these requirements.
There's one more part, and that's around taking a step back and looking at all the factors that we now have been talking about. Then you take a step back and you look at them from a kind of a systems perspective. So you evaluate, how am I
Mm,
doing in all of these aspects? And then you find out, is there a bottleneck? Is there a weak area right now that I need to improve? Because it's not that you are building your innovation management system and then you have it and that's it. It's a process. It's you're continuously improving it because there's always a weak area. Things are happening around you that you need to adjust and tweak your system. So that is the PDCA cycle, if you will, that is built into every management system, that you're making sure continuously that it does what you want it to do. And it's a living thing, basically. And that's what we talk about in the last clause.
okay, very good. You mentioned earlier in one of these requirements, I was just looking at my notes to see if I remember where it was, but you mentioned about roles and needing to clarify roles. There's a framework that I'm familiar with and use when we talk about trying to help an organization innovate. If we do this at the grassroots, we might make some progress, but it's not going to hold on at all, right? There's activities we need our senior leaders to be involved in. We need our senior managers being able to catch some ideas and help people with resources. And we need our frontline employees to be looking around for, frankly, stupid things we're doing and
Mhm.
customer opportunities, because they're the ones closest to the customers. Do you talk about, as we are trying to create an innovation management system, what the roles are in the organization? Can you give us some insights about that?
As a matter of fact, we do not specify the roles because it varies a lot, but I think the
Hmm?
way you talked about them makes perfect sense, and that works for most organizations. If you're a smaller organization, obviously some of those roles will be the same person.
Right.
But it's very clear that roles should be specified, and that's a part of a requirement in the standard. However, it's quite interesting because now we're talking a lot about the individuals that are going to work within the system. And at this moment, we're developing a specific standard for the people. It's a competency framework
Hmm.
for innovation management. And that speaks directly to what you're saying. So, not only what role do you have, but should you have a particular role, what do you need to know to perform that role well?
Okay.
So, for
Excellent.
example, a senior leader, they don't need to know all the details, but they need to know how they can act as a senior leader, at least not how they can get out of the way. So they need that knowledge. Leaders that are closer to innovation activities, they need to know much more. They need to know how to set up a strategy and how to manage a portfolio of innovation initiatives, for example. And then there are more like coaches, facilitators, and so on. They need to know more about what are the tools that we're using in the teams and so on and so forth. So that competency framework is now being developed, and that will very nicely complement the standard that we have already. So then there will be not mandatory roles, but there will be examples of roles that you can have in your organization. And then you can also easily, and that's great for university professors, what am I going to teach people so that they are effective in these roles? And that competency framework will help identifying those knowledge and skills that you need.
Absolutely. Yeah. As you're saying that, I was thinking back in my engineering days, we followed the Carnegie Mellon software maturity model. And they had one for the personal maturity model too, as a computer scientist. And we found that really helpful to just help people think about. It was interesting by adding a little bit of structure in how you think about the work you do, you actually freed up creativity and innovation, right? And sometimes people are surprised by that, that we can add structure and actually improve what happens with innovation. So,
Yeah. Yeah, let me just say that we're being inspired by those models, and we're now creating similar maturity models, both for organizations and for people. That's a little bit later. But for organizations, we have it already so that you can assess, are you at the level that you need to be
yeah,
in all of these aspects? And that will help you to get the granularity and also get the instruments on how to improve in your organization. Very typically, organizations don't know what to improve. They say, okay, we lack innovation. What can we do? Well, we can increase the R&D budget, but that's pretty much it. But that's just one thing, and probably that's not the best thing to do to if you want to increase your output.
Right.
So,
Right.
so we're just giving organizations all these instruments to be able to improve. And very often, it's not the funding, it's not even the process or the number of ideas. It's around your strategy and your leadership, for example. So
Exactly.
those are typically the ones that it gives the better outcome or better leverage to
Yeah.
start addressing.
Yeah. Yeah. Leadership has to think about this differently. I remember an interview with Dr. Michael Eckhart. He was a fellow at the Center for Creative Leadership. And he did research basically asking the question, how does leading innovation differ from leading the organization, right? And you and I and everyone else listening that has been part of innovation understands this isn't operations. We don't operate in a consistent, reliable environment. We're doing things that are new and it's chaotic, and you need different leadership, at least recognizing that there's differences, right? So everything you shared really resonates with me, and I'm looking forward to getting into these tools more and the requirements that are in the standard. I think it would be a very useful way of communicating to organizations. What do you do to innovate? Now, most of our listeners are in product management, often in medium to large organizations, but there's some people listening that are doing startups and the like. Magnus, many of them are doing that everyday work as a product manager. About 25% or so are senior leaders or product VPs or chief product officers. How do you think about this standard influencing organization? Is there a role for product managers and product leaders, or is it really something that is more applicable to the senior leaders of the organization?
I think it could be very much applied in that particular setting. I think the first question would be, in my role as a product manager, how much of my work is actually part of doing new things, renewal efforts, and so on. And I think to every product manager now and then needs to think a lot about that question. Some of them are this is what they do. They are evolving the product, and sometimes to a greater extent. So there might be even radical innovation in
Right.
there. So I think most of them would be interested at least to start to think about the practices that I'm currently using. Are they in line with these practices that are outlined here, or are the things that I might be able to improve? So that's a simple question, and that's also the simple assessment and the gap analysis that could be the starting point. So that would be my recommendation to start doing that, and then very quickly they will find if if there are any gaps, what is it that is relevant for me to maybe take a deeper look into?
Right.
If it might be leadership or processes or around strategy, or maybe the engagement of top management that might be lacking, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So I think that would be a practical starting point to start looking at the standards.
I'll tell you how I intend to use this, and maybe a positioning for others as well. Because it's an ISO standard, that just gives it credibility and weight, right? This is an internationally recognized standard, and adopting it has its own benefits, as like adopting the quality standard that we talked about. When I'm involved with an organization, I'm primarily involved with their product managers and their product VP or CPO, and helping them learn better. How do we work together to do some of the things like the process things you walk through? That's what product managers are used to. Let's understand the customer's problem, think about possible solutions, validate those, et cetera. So when I get done helping product managers just fill in some of the holes in their experience and knowledge, they walk away going, wow, this really helped. I can think more clearly about what we're doing together. And they're collaborating with each other more now too, which is really helpful. And they often say, man, I really wish our senior leaders understood these things, right? They don't really understand what is involved in product and some of the things we work through. And I think offering them, say, hey, there's this ISO standard that you should be aware of that might be a way for you to position to your senior leaders to learn about some of the things that are important to you that would help the organization overall. In the past, I've recommended one book or another, but there's a little bit more weight to an ISO standard, and that might be a good way to influence the senior leaders. What do you think?
So totally agree with you. And senior leaders need to be involved in one way or another. And one way would be to make sure that they have a little bit more knowledge of this. And approaching this standard is a way for them to, well, they can implement the whole thing, but they do not need to know the details
Right.
themselves. So it's very helpful to them, and they don't have to pick between one consultant or another consultant, or one management book and another management book, because that is a confusion that has been going on for quite some time. Which
Yep.
framework should I use? And there are people coming to these senior leaders, and they're promoting their own frameworks and so on. Now we have a little bit, let's say, behind all those great frameworks that are out there, we just codified what is the foundation. So it's less risky to adopt this product than whatever else is out there. So I think that knowledge piece is should not be underestimated when approaching top management, to make sure that they understand that what we're doing in product development will solve their bigger problems, their future problems, what keeps them
Right.
awake at night. So kind of connecting that to the sense of urgency, because sometimes they feel the sense of urgency, but they don't really connect it to the, okay, we need new products, or maybe we even might need new customer segments or something like that.
Yep.
So helping them to make that sense of urgency connection, that innovation can help evolve the company going forward and solve some of their biggest issue for the future. So there are a couple of ways that this actually could, exactly as you say, start engaging top management and senior leaders in being a little bit more aware and proactive also in this space.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that, solving their biggest challenges, right? Their biggest problems. Because organizationally, we might have a strategic direction that says we need to grow this market 20% this year. Like, how are we going to do that, right? Product people will look at that objective and say, okay, what new value can we bring to the customers in that market that they would actually pay us for, right? Is that a new product? Is that a better product? What are we going to do? And this is a framework to help instill that kind of thinking, customer-focused innovation thinking in the organization. So, okay, really exciting. I'm going to ask you for a moment for an innovation quote. I do want to remind everyone listening why we do this podcast is to bring valuable information, as we were just talking about, to the product management community. And in part, that is possible because I have the opportunity to tell people about the training that I do. I did just mention that I do help organizations. Typically, they're product managers. Typically, it's a product VP that asks me to come in. And there's a specific system called the Rapid Product Mastery Experience that I bring them. And we talk through basically this research-backed body of knowledge from PDMA, I mentioned before, the Product Development Management Association. I just make it easy to learn these 7 elements, 7 knowledge areas that product managers need to know, like process, like portfolio management, like figuring out how to create a culture of innovation. And I'll be incorporating some of the ISO knowledge that you're sprinkling in here as well on this. But it's a great way to bring product managers up to speed, in a sense, to skill them up, to help them improve their capabilities and give them confidence. So if you are a product VP and maybe you have heard some elements in the organization of like, we really need to think about the care and feeding of our product people, particularly our product managers, this is an excellent way. A lot of organizations have brought this in for that purpose alone, to help the product managers feel some love, feel like they're getting the attention and improving what they do. So anyone listening, if you're interested in finding out more about that, you can do it individually. It's really powerful to do it as a group with people at work. Simply go to productmasterynow.com and find out more. Magnus, what do you have for us for an innovation quote?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and there are many quotes in this space
Yep.
that you could bring about. I picked the one that is spend a little to learn a lot. That's a little bit of a mantra here, and it comes from Vijay Govindarayan of the Tech School of Business, and he's using it to talk about the innovation processes and so on. But I think there's a bigger lesson here. It's about learning a lot. Innovation is a learning game, it's a knowledge game. So you're navigating uncertainty. That's what makes this discipline so specific to other
Right.
disciplines. And where there is uncertainty, there's also risk. You have a lot of assumptions. So you need to find a way to move through that uncertainty and kind of transform all those assumptions into knowledge. And you can do that the long, cumbersome way and spend a lot of resources, but you can also do it in a smart way. And I mentioned previously hypothesis driven learning, where you very carefully design experiments to make sure that your new product fits with the customer need or user needs. And if you can find a way, a systematic way to do this in kind of the economically most viable or feasible way, that means that you're spending as little as possible to learn as much as possible. And that's really the way you need to optimize everything you do in the innovation space. So there is a bigger lesson there as well. It's about navigating uncertainty and finding the right tools to do so. You mentioned
Right.
portfolio management, iterative processes, experimentation, and so on and so forth. So uncertainty is not something that we should be afraid of. We need to embrace it with the right systematic tool.
Yeah, it's
So
part of innovation. We
yeah,
better figure out a way to embrace it.
yeah.
So, okay, really good. I like the quote, spend a little to learn a lot. We get lots of quotes here, and this one's new to me, so really enjoy that as well.
Okay, oh, that's good.
Yep. We're going to share with listeners in the show notes your link to your LinkedIn profile. But what are other ways that people, what do you want to share with us in terms of resources you have available, other work you're doing, how to find out more about these things?
You mentioned Amplify. We are creating, let's say, the additional resources you need to start adopting these standards. It could be training programs, for example, both live training programs and e-learning programs that are related to the standards. Connected to that, there is certification being built, independent certification bodies. We could do kind of convey that information as well. And finally, there are the assessment tools to start understanding how well am my organization doing compared to what's in these standards. And there's another URL for that, innovationmanagementsystem.com. So that will be hopefully featured also so that people can find that through your site.
Fantastic. And tell us the URL one more time.
innovationmanagementsystem.com.
Okay, innovationmanagementsystem.com. Excellent. And I'm capturing that as well. Okay, so that sounds like a good place to go to. And does that take you to the Amplify organization as well?
That is the Amplify and
Okay.
our resources, and we are linking also to the standards and so on.
Okay.
Obviously, there are ways to find this through ISO. You can find the standards as such, and there are other standardization bodies in the world that would have that information if you want to purchase the standard, for example. So we are then providing the materials around the standards that will help you to make them actionable.
Okay, excellent. So on LinkedIn, it's Magnus Karlsson, and we'll have the link there in the show notes for that. And then innovationmanagementsystem.com to find out more information about everything that we talked about. So fantastic. Thank you for sharing those resources for us as well. And I really appreciate the discussion. I learned a lot about what the standard is and have been really intrigued to dive in more deeply.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It was a great conversation. And wish everybody out there a good reading of this new standard. And I do think it's relevant for most of the listeners. And really looking forward to get more feedback because we're on the learning journey also with the
Sure.
standards. We're trying to understand how will they fit in environments like product development, which I think would be one of the major application areas of the standard. So also very curious to see how that plays out. So thank you very
Fantastic.
much, Chad.
Yeah, and if along with that, if anyone is pursuing the standard or does so in the future and has feedback for Magnus, reach out through LinkedIn or through the website. I'm sure you'd be glad to have that information too. So, Magnus, thank you again for being with us.
Thank you, Chad.
And listeners, as a reminder, if you want to have the written version of everything we just discussed, we create an article with all the details. Simply go to productmasterynow.com/551. As always, keep innovating.
Thank you for listening to Product Mastery Now, where product leaders and managers gain product mastery through practical knowledge, influence, and confidence. By listening, you are becoming a product master, creating products customers love. Find additional resources at productmasterynow.com. Keep innovating.